The people of the Wushang sect are absolute idiots. That was my final thought before I died in my past life, and now that I've been reborn, my opinion hasn't changed one bit. I knelt on the profound ice cliff for 2 days. The biting cold finally made me accept the reality. I was alive again. In my previous life, my master and 6 senior brothers used 7 swords to seal my heart meridians before a final strike pierced my chest. I died at the hands of the master I respected most. Before they killed me, every single one of them told me that knowing me was the greatest regret of their lives. I joined the sect at 5. I started smithing at 8. By 12, I reached foundation establishment, and by 15, I formed my golden core. Everyone knew Yi Wanwan was the greatest genius of the Wushang sect. I was the pampered little sister of Qingyun Peak. But everything changed when Yi Qian arrived. Suddenly, I wasn't the little sister anymore. I was just the 7th senior sister. My cultivation hit a wall and stopped moving. Meanwhile, Yi Qian soared. She became the 2nd person in the sect's history to reach the golden core stage at 15. My master's love and my brother's attention shifted entirely to her. Frustrated and neglected, I became bitter. In my past life, I supposedly let my hatred drive me to shatter Yi Qian's golden core. I was kicked out of the sect, became an outcast, and eventually fell into the demonic realm, only to be hunted down and slaughtered by my own family. Now I was back. It was the 3rd day of my punishment on the ice cliff. My golden core had already been dug out of my chest as payment for what I did to Yi Qian. The freezing wind was seeping into my bones, destroying my foundation just like it did last time. I didn't have many people I truly cared about in my life. I had given all my sincerity to these people at Qingyun Peak, and in return, they took my life. Fine. Since they don't want my heart, I'll take it back. I shifted from kneeling to sitting. I looked at my hands. My cultivation was leaking away. At this rate, I'd be a commoner in 3 months. Why wait? I raised my hand and drew an attack talisman in the air. The winds on the cliff were sharp as knives. I funneled that violent energy into my own body, targeting my damaged Dantian. The guard brother nearby paled. "What are you doing?" he screamed. I looked up at him and smiled. "Destroying my cultivation." The icy energy slashed through my insides. Blood splattered across the white snow, staining it a deep, ugly red. I felt a twisted sense of relief. Everything they gave me, I was giving back. From now on, we owed each other nothing. "Save her. Someone help." I ignored their screams. I reached out and caught a snowflake in my palm. I was free. The news spread like wildfire. Yi Wanwan had gone mad. The former genius of the Wushang sect had crippled herself. Later, in a small bamboo hut at the foot of the mountain, a voice boomed in my ear. "Why were you so impulsive? I told you I'd beg Master to let you down in 3 months. Are you doing this just to make us feel guilty?" It was Ji Chonghui, my eldest senior brother. He sounded furious. "Everyone is saying Qingyun Peak mistreated you. They're saying the little junior sister ruined you. Are you happy now?" Happy? Yes, I was. If I had waited 3 months, I would have been a broken shell anyway. I let out a cold laugh. "Yi Wanwan, what are you laughing at?" I opened my eyes and stared at his elegant, handsome face. He was the person I respected most once, but now I only saw the coldness in his eyes. He didn't care about me. He was just annoyed that I was making him look bad and hurting Yi Qian's reputation. I remembered how I begged him to believe I didn't break her core, and how he coldly pushed me away. I remembered him stabbing me through the heart. "I'm laughing at how stupid you are," I said. Ji Chonghui's brow furrowed. "What kind of look is that?" "I'm looking at you the same way you look at me," I replied. "So, tell me, brother, what does it look like?" He flinched. He looked at my cold eyes and probably thought I really had lost my mind. His expression turned dark, and he suddenly lunged, grabbing me by the throat. His voice was ice. "Whoever you are, get out of my sister's body." He thought I was possessed. Without another word, he slammed his palm onto the top of my head. Soul search. Soul searching is a brutal technique. It forces a way into someone's soul to see their memories. If done wrong, it turns the victim into an idiot. My body was already failing. I couldn't handle this. It felt like my head was exploding. I tried to scream, but only blood poured out of my mouth. After a long moment, Ji Chonghui froze. The soul was mine. No possession. I wiped the blood from my lips, grinning like a demon. It's me, brother. It's always been me. He realized he was still choking me and scrambled back in horror. My neck was bruised purple, and I couldn't stop coughing up blood. I'm sorry. I thought you were. I didn't have the energy to listen. The pain was unbearable. My cultivation was gone, and his soul surge had nearly shattered what was left of my spirit. I gritted my teeth, refusing to collapse in front of him. Seeing me look like a broken doll, he panicked. I'll give you spiritual energy. Don't be afraid, little sister. I tried to speak, but my voice was a raspy whisper. What did you say? He asked, leaning in. I looked at him with pure sarcasm. I'm not your little sister. Your sister is right there. Ji Chonghui stiffened and turned toward the door. A young girl in a blue dress was standing there, her eyes brimming with tears. He froze. Little junior sister? He scrambled to his feet, completely forgetting about me, his other sister bleeding out on the bed. He rushed to her. Why are you here? I lay there, feeling my soul cracking and my body failing. The pain made me curl into a ball. I wanted to scream at them to get out. Why wouldn't these people just leave me alone? Yi Qian forced a tearful smile, holding a bowl of medicine. Eldest brother. I heard seventh sister was brought down the mountain. I came to see her. Ji Chonghuai's voice softened into a gentle scolding. His worry for me vanished as if it never existed. You're not recovered yet, Ji Chonghui said, his voice dropping all the edge it had used on me. Why did you come all this way? We're here for your senior sister. Yi Qian bit her lower lip, glancing at me with a timid, fearful look. I was afraid senior sister was still angry with me. She won't be, Ji Chonghui promised. He took the medicine bowl from her, his tone turning incredibly gentle. Our little junior sister is so well-behaved. How could she possibly stay mad at you? Yi Qian looked at me again, her eyes wide and cautious. Then, why won't she even look at me? Ji Chonghui followed her gaze. I had turned my back to them, curling into a ball under the covers. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to hear them. My silence was enough to make Yi Qian's eyes overflow with tears. Senior sister really does hate me, she sobbed, her voice trembling. I know, it's all my fault. But about the golden core, I really didn't know. I didn't mean to take it. I only found out my father came up the mountain after I woke up. If I had known, I never would have let him do it. I'll give it back to you, senior sister. Please don't hate me. Ji Chonghui couldn't stand seeing her cry. He panicked, reaching out to comfort her. I know. Senior brother knows everything. It's not your fault. Master has already made the decision about the core, so don't mention it again. Little Seven doesn't blame you. She wouldn't. They stood there, one crying and the other coaxing, a pathetic display of affection that felt like salt in my wounds. Suddenly, a sharp metallic sound cut through their drama. They both froze and turned toward the bed. I was pale as a ghost, my face like gold leaf, but I had managed to pull a dagger from under the pillow. With shaking hands, I held it out toward Yi Qian. Come, I wheezed. One single word. Ji Chonghuai's brain finally kicked back into gear, but not with guilt. He was furious. He lunged forward and slapped the dagger out of my hand. The blow was so heavy it pinned my hand against the bed frame with a sickening crack. The dagger hit the floor with a loud clang. My face went even whiter. Ji Chonghui recognized the weapon. It was a spiritual tool he had gifted me years ago. You really are heartless, he roared, his face twisted in rage. You dare try to force the core out of a child right in front of me? Who knows what horrors you've committed behind our backs? I didn't give you this weapon to use it like this. He kicked the dagger across the room, screaming insults at me. I didn't look up. I didn't defend myself. I just repeated one word over and over in a weak, raspy whisper. Get out, get out, get out of here. My eyes began to burn with a dark, red light. My left hand clenched the sheets, my fingertips moving slowly, tracing the air. I was trying to draw a slaughter array. I wanted to kill them. I wanted to kill everyone. Even if I died, I wanted to take them to hell with me. But then, Yi Qian grabbed Ji Chonghuai's arm, sobbing. Senior brother, don't fight with her. It's all because of me. I'll leave the mountain right now. I'll leave the Wushang sect. Just stop fighting. Little 8. Ji Chonghui called out, but she had already turned and bolted out the door. Outside, I heard another voice. Little junior sister? What's wrong? Why are you crying? Third senior brother. I'm leaving. I'm leaving the sect. Wait, who bullied you? I knew it. It was Yi Wanwan, wasn't it? I'm going to teach her a lesson. A moment later, Dong Ming stormed into the room, dragging Yi Qian back with him. The second he saw me, his face filled with malice. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed me and hauled me off the bed, throwing me onto the floor. The movement shattered my concentration. The array I was drawing broke. I started to laugh. It was a loud, hollow, miserable sound that startled everyone in the room. As I lay there on the floor, I began to cough. Blood sprayed from my lips, staining the floorboards a deep, vivid red. I couldn't stop laughing. I was laughing at my past life, at how absurdly blind I had been. How had it taken me 2 lifetimes to see these people for who they really were? The 3 of them turned pale. Yi Qian whimpered, Is she dying? The blood kept coming. Dong Ming panicked and let go of my arm, stepping back in horror. Suddenly, the door slammed open. Elder Yu Chun from the medicine hall rushed in. She took one look at me and let out a roar of fury. I told you she needed rest. What are you people doing? Do you want her dead that badly? She is your sister. Dong Ming, are you trying to murder her? Dong Ming muttered under his breath. How was I supposed to know her meridians were actually broken? I thought she was faking it. Elder Yu Chun looked like she wanted to slap him. Fine. I don't care about your drama. But she is my patient. If you kill her, don't ever come to the medicine hall again. I won't set foot on this peak ever again. That terrified them. They needed Yu Chun to take care of their precious, little junior sister, Yi Qian. They immediately began bowing and apologizing, throwing out every sweet word they could to keep the elder from leaving. Yu Chun looked at me with a complicated expression. Once, I was the one they called little junior sister. Now, I was just an obstacle. She prescribed several expensive spiritual medicines, charging Ji Chonghuai and Dong Ming a fortune as a silent punishment. She must have absolute quiet, Yu Chun warned. She was shocked I was even alive. My injuries were fatal, yet my will to live was a force she couldn't ignore. She didn't realize that I had to live. I had a second chance, and I refused to die like a dog. Because of the elder's orders, my punishment was changed from the frozen abyss to a 1-year confinement. No one was allowed to see me except Yu Chun. It was exactly what I needed. A month later, my condition stabilized. You're the strongest patient I've ever seen, Yu Chun remarked. To recover this much in a month is a miracle. But child, your meridians are snapped. Your core is gone. Cultivation, it might be over for you. I looked down and said nothing. She patted my shoulder. Just be happy you're alive. Once she left, I forced myself to stand. I walked. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. As soon as I could move properly, I sat cross-legged on the floor. My cultivation was gone. I was empty, but I wasn't panicked. My body was different from others. I was born with a heavenly 5-element root. In this world, roots are ranked from low to heavenly. A heavenly root is the rarest in existence, but because I had all 5 elements, my cultivation speed was naturally glacial. Before I joined the sect, my father had sealed 4 of my elements, leaving only fire. It allowed me to break through to the golden core stage by age 15, but after that, I hit a wall. I could never progress. In my past life, I never understood why. Now I knew. The 5 elements aren't meant to be separated. They need each other to flow. I closed my eyes and began to circulate the tiny bit of spiritual energy I could gather. Every movement felt like my body was being shredded. I shook with agony, but I didn't stop. A month passed in total isolation. Then I felt it. A snap. The old seals on my soul shattered. I opened my palm. 5 distinct flickers of light danced at my fingertips. Gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. My true heavenly root was finally awake. A cold, sharp smile spread across my pale face. It was time to start over. My eyes were bright with a new, burning focus. 3 days later, I successfully reached the first level of chi refinement. It felt slow to me, but I knew the truth. Breaking through within 3 days of unsealing my roots was unheard of. It was terrifyingly fast. Still, I wasn't satisfied. My 5-element roots were naturally slow to cultivate. If I wanted to catch up to the geniuses on Qingyan Peak, I had to work harder than anyone else. I spent every waking moment absorbing the essence of the world. I made a choice regarding my cultivation method. I refused to use any techniques from Qingyan Peak. Instead, I used a basic breathing manual I had bought for a single spirit stone. I wanted to cut all ties with this place. I wouldn't even use their knowledge. After my daily session, I looked out at the ruined herb garden. I remembered the words of Elder Yuchan. He had handed me a spirit planting manual and some seeds with a look of pity and hope. He told me that even if I couldn't be a great cultivator, I could still be a gardener. He didn't want me to give up. I walked into the garden and began to plant. I used the spirit language technique, the gentlest of all arts. It involved basic cloud calling and rainmaking. After a few tries, I found the rhythm. Under the nurtured rain, the seeds sprouted and broke through the soil. Within half a day, the garden was lush and green. I built a scarecrow and slapped a puppet talisman on its chest. It stood guard, keeping the birds away from my work. I sat in the center of the courtyard to meditate. I had placed gathering spirit talismans all around the hut. The air was thick with spiritual energy. It was the perfect place to grow. Another month passed. My fire root surged, hitting the 12th level of chi refinement. My other roots lagged behind. Wood was at level 6, water and earth were at 5, and gold was only at level 3. If I hadn't intentionally suppressed it, my fire root would have already broken through to foundation establishment. The gap between the elements was getting wider. It was frustrating. But then I noticed something strange. By practicing the spirit planting arts, my wood, earth, and water roots were actually improving together. It was an unexpected bonus. Suddenly, I heard a sound from the garden. Asterisk crunch. Crunch. Asterisk I turned around and saw a small, black-shelled creature. It was a turtle. I frowned, wondering where it had come from. The turtle ignored me and took another bite of my precious herbs. I realized then why my garden's spiritual energy seemed lower than usual. This little thief had been feasting on my hard work. The turtle just stared at me, its mouth full of greens. I shook my head and let it be. I had bigger things to worry about. I looked up at the sky. I had so much to do. My daily routine became a grueling cycle. I woke up and meditated for an hour. At dawn, I practiced spirit planting to nourish my wood, earth, and water roots. By mid-morning, I was in the back house, channeling the power of the earth. Then, I headed to the forest of falling arrows to sense the element of metal. After a quick lunch, I practiced my physical movements and sword strikes. In the evening, I studied talismans and formations. Before bed, I analyzed everything I had done that day. I looked for mistakes. I looked for ways to be faster. I never slacked off. Not for a single second. 3 months later, my fire root hit the peak of level 13. My other 4 roots had reached level 12. Then, I hit a wall. For 3 days, I couldn't move an inch. The bottleneck was solid. I stopped trying to force it. I picked up a bucket and began watering the plants by hand. I started to doubt myself. Was my method wrong? Was it truly impossible to cultivate all 5 elements at once? I looked at my hands. In my past life, I had heard stories of people trying this. They all failed. Every single one of them died or went mad when they tried to reach the higher stages. But I was stubborn. I wanted to be the first person in thousands of years to succeed. The black turtle looked up at me, a strange golden light flickering in its tiny eyes. It slowed its chewing as if it were listening to my thoughts. If I couldn't find a new way, I would simply rely on hard work. I redoubled my efforts. Another month passed. Finally, I felt the bottleneck crack. In my world, chi refinement has 13 levels. To reach foundation establishment, the 5 scattered currents of energy in my body had to merge. I sat perfectly still, feeling the breath of the world. The turtle sat beside me, watching. The currents of energy swirled around me, gathering in my dantian. They formed 5 stable vortexes, spinning in perfect harmony. I had done it. I had reached the early stage of foundation establishment. I opened my eyes and felt the change immediately. I waved my hand toward the herb garden, and the plants grew 3 times faster than before. I whispered to myself that it was a good start. The turtle took another bite of a high-grade herb. It seemed to notice that the plants I grew were different. They were bursting with life. I stared at the horizon. Given enough time, I knew I could return to the golden course stage. I was sure of it. A full year had passed since my confinement began. One afternoon, I heard footsteps. Ji Chonghui had arrived, and Do Ming was with him. I quickly gathered my talismans and burned them. I didn't want them to see what I had been doing. The fire reflected in my eyes as I waited. Ji Chonghui walked in and placed a small, ornate box on the table. He looked at me with a complicated expression. He told me it was for me. I didn't touch it. Do Ming sneered, telling me that our first senior brother had traded a powerful treasure for this solid foundation pill. He said it would help me regrow my meridians. He told me I might be able to cultivate again, even if I would always be slow and weak. I stared at the box. In my past life, Ji Chonghui had given me this exact same pill. But less than half a day later, he had taken it back. He gave it to Yi Qian instead. She had messed up her own cultivation and needed it more. And back then, I had let him take it. Not this time. Ji Chonghui handed me the box. Do Ming sneered, telling me it was a solid foundation pill. In my last life, Ji had given me this exact pill, only to take it back an hour later for Yi Qian. I looked at the box, my voice dripping with irony. I told them I didn't need it. Ji's face went pale. For the past year, I had rejected everything he sent my way. He probably thought I was just throwing a tantrum. But this time, the tantrum was lasting a little too long. Do Ming lost his temper. He barked at me, asking who I thought I was. He reminded me of how much they had done to fix the disaster I caused. He said Ji had been busy taking care of Yi Qian, just so her family wouldn't hunt me down. He asked me what right I had to give them attitude. Ji didn't say a word. He just looked at me with a mix of sorrow and silent condemnation. It was like he was waiting for me to realize how immature I was being. I laughed at myself. I asked if that meant I was being ungrateful. Do Ming snapped that if I didn't learn my lesson, I could stay locked in this forest until I died. I clenched my fists. So, a year of confinement was just the beginning. Do Ming saw my reaction and smirked. He told me that Yi Qian was being generous. She had convinced their master that if I just knelt and admitted I was wrong, I could finally leave. I didn't answer him. Instead, I looked at Ji Chonghui. I asked him if I took the pill, would he ever ask for it back? He looked confused. He promised it was mine. I tucked the box away and stood up. I told them I was ready to go. Do Ming was shocked. He didn't believe I would actually give in. After all, I was once the top genius of Qinyan Peak. I told him he was right. I just didn't want to be locked up until I died. He laughed, thinking I had finally broken. As we walked out of the bamboo forest toward Yi Qian's residence, disciples started pointing and whispering. They called me a monster for shattering her golden core. Ji told me to ignore them, but Do Ming just glared at me, asking if the rumors were lies. I didn't care. I had realized during my year of solitude that I didn't belong here anyway. There was no point in arguing with fools. We arrived at the lake house. It used to be mine, but they gave it to Yi Qian because of her water spirit root. She ran out to meet them, looking like a pure, innocent flower. She hugged Ji and Do Ming, laughing and joking about what gifts they brought her. For a long time, they completely forgot I was even there. Then, the air grew heavy. A man was standing on the surface of the lake. It was Master Yinding. Everyone immediately fell to their knees. I remained standing. I stared him in the eye until the sheer pressure of his aura forced me to bow slightly. I greeted him as Taoist Lord, not Master. The change in title made everyone freeze. Inside the house, the atmosphere was suffocating. Yi Qian's father, Yi Kanjing, slammed his hand on the table. He demanded justice for his daughter's ruined cultivation. The sect leader tried to calm him, promising the sect would take responsibility for Yi Qian's future. Then, Yinding spoke. Kneel, he commanded. The pressure hit me like a physical weight, forcing me to my knees. Yi Kanjing sneered at me, demanding I confess. I looked at Yi Qian. I told them the truth. We had agreed to a duel. Everything was done by the rules. I told them I didn't know what I was supposed to be sorry for. Yi Qian panicked. She tried to act the martyr, telling her father it wasn't my fault and that she was just too weak. But Yi Kanjing wasn't having it. He grabbed a teacup and hurled it at my head. It shattered against my forehead. Blood began to drip down, blurring my right eye. Yinding looked at me with cold eyes and asked where I wanted to be hit next. I didn't wipe the blood away. I told him again that I wasn't wrong. I told them her golden core shattered because her own cultivation was unstable. It was her own failure, not my strike. I told them to stop trying to pin their problems on me. The room went silent. Yi Qian turned white as a sheet. Ji Chonghui suddenly stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. I didn't have time to dodge. The sting burned my cheek. Ji hissed at me, telling me to stop lying. He tried to force a confession out of me, claiming I was just jealous and wanted to give her a lesson. He begged me to say it was just an accident. I felt the heat rising in my face, but I didn't blink. I didn't back down. I looked Yi Qian straight in the eyes and let out a cold laugh. "You're wrong," I said. "I am here to admit a mistake, but not the one you're thinking of." I paused, letting the silence hang. "My mistake was taking this long to see all of your true faces." Yi Qian failed her breakthrough. She pinned the blame on me. "You all knew the truth, yet you chose to help her. You cut out my golden core. You punished me at Mysterious Ice Cliff. You did it all because I have no one behind me." I turned my gaze toward everyone in the Wushang sect. Yi Qian has the Great Yi family. She shares their name. I'm just an orphan whose parents are long gone. It's easy to make me the scapegoat when you think I'm weak. She thought so, and so did all of you. I looked at Yinding and the sect leader. They looked like statues of virtue, but I saw them for what they were, hypocrites. Ji Chonghuai's face turned deathly pale. "Shut up," he shouted. "And you," I said, my voice cutting through his. "Stop pretending to be the fair and caring senior brother. Do you even realize how biased you are? Whenever Yi Qian cries, it's my fault. Whenever her eyes get red, I'm the bully. Is she brain damaged or disabled? How is it she's always being bullied by me? Isn't she your number one genius? Isn't her talent supposed to be higher than mine? If she's so great, why is it always my fault when things go wrong?" I screamed the words. Ji Chonghuai was so angry his hand shook. He raised it to strike me again, but this time, I caught his wrist. Before he could react, I slapped him twice across the face. Asterisk slap. Slap. Asterisk. The sound was sharp and loud. He stared at me, frozen in disbelief. I shoved him back with all my strength. "Get lost. That was just the interest you owed me." I turned back to the high seats. "Yinding, I don't believe for a second you didn't see the issues with Yi Qian's golden core. You saw it, yet you sat there and watched our duel. I asked for your permission before we fought. You gave it. Tell me, how does someone at the early stage of the golden core realm shatter another person's core in the same stage? Isn't that a joke? You all know the truth. You just wanted to force a confession out of me to clear the path for the Yi family's precious daughter. Well, it's not happening." The pressure from Yinding's aura intensified. It felt like my bones were about to snap, but I refused to bow my head. Yi Kanjing's face was livid. He sneered at the leaders. "Sect leader, Yinding, is this how you teach your disciples?" I didn't wait for them to answer. I reached into my robes and pulled out my jade identity token, the mark of a direct disciple. I held it up for everyone to see, then I let go. The jade hit the floor with a heavy thud. I smiled mockingly. I'm not a disciple anymore. I wasn't kicked out. I'm leaving because this sect is too filthy. I refuse to stay. The sect leader's expression remained calm, but his voice was cold. "Do you know the price of deserting the Wushang sect?" "It's not desertion," I corrected him. "It's a self-severance. I leave the sect, my cultivation is stripped, my meridians are destroyed, and I never set foot here again. Isn't that the rule?" I started to laugh. "But my cultivation is already gone. Everything I learned from Wushang, I've already paid back. I owe you nothing." "Presumptuous," Yinding roared. A massive wave of energy slammed into me, throwing me out of the hall. I tumbled across the floor, blood staining my clothes. Ji Chonghuai, Do Ming, and Yi Qian looked on, their faces pale. Yi Qian was shaking uncontrollably. I dragged myself up from the corridor floor. "Even if you want to kill me to keep me quiet, I'll say it again. I did not break Yi Qian's golden core. She failed on her own and framed me. The Yi family just wanted my core, and the Wushang sect helped them. You are all blind and heartless. Yinding, you failed your disciple. You aren't fit to be a master." My voice echoed through the heart of the lake. No one dared to speak. I looked up, my eyes burning. If I, Yi Wanwan, disappear one day, it was Yi Qian and the Yi family who killed me. And the Wushang sect was their accomplice. Yinding's eyes were dark and unreadable. "You still won't admit your mistake?" "I'd rather die," I said coldly. "What if I did admit it? I'd carry a foul name, live like a dog, and still get kicked out in the end. I'd rather die than give you that satisfaction." "Fine," Yinding said. "Lock her in the Blackwater prison. There are two places in the sect that disciples fear most. One is the mysterious ice cliff. The other is the Blackwater prison. It's reserved for the worst criminals. It's a place of absolute darkness and freezing water. It's designed to drive you insane. I let out a low laugh. Yinding, I'm not your disciple anymore. You have no right to punish me. Take her away, Yinding commanded. Two disciples grabbed my arms and dragged me off. I didn't struggle. I just looked at Yikanjing. I saw the murder in his eyes. I mouthed one word to him, trash. His face twisted with rage. Master. Ji Chonghuai fell to his knees, crying. Please, spare Junior sister. Do Ming looked at me, covered in blood and laughing, and then looked at the trembling Yi Qian. For the first time, he looked confused. Was it possible? Was I actually telling the truth? The room was silent. But less than half an hour later, the two disciples who had taken me away came sprinting back, out of breath. Sect leader. She's gone. Yuan escaped. Escaped? Everyone was shocked. How? Her cultivation is gone. How could two of you lose her? One disciple hesitantly pulled out a burnt scrap of paper. It was a talisman. The room went still. Ji Chonghuai gasped. A talisman? When did she learn that? We don't have talisman masters in our sect. Nobody knew how I had done it. But now, they had a new crime to pin on me, stealing secret arts from other sects. The entire Wushang sect went into lockdown. They began a massive search for me. Yinding stared at the scrap of paper, his expression grim. Meanwhile, Elder Yu Chun, who had heard the news, sighed softly to herself. She knew the sect had made a terrible mistake. Wushang didn't teach talismans, but the library had ancient books left by the ancestors. She remembered seeing me there years ago, studying those dusty scrolls and practicing strokes in the air. We had thrown away a genius. While the sect was in an uproar, I had gone to the one place they wouldn't expect, the mysterious ice cliff. By the time Ji Chonghuai and Do Ming found me, I was standing at the very edge of the precipice. The wind tore at my hair. I looked at the crowd of disciples chasing me, and I smiled. What are you doing? Ji Chonghuai screamed. Come back. My smile didn't reach my eyes. I spoke slowly, making sure every person there heard me. I did not break Yi Qian's golden core. She framed me. She stole my core. And you tried to force me to lie for her. I looked them all in the eye. I would rather die than admit to a lie. I took a step backward, right off the edge. I'll never admit it. My voice echoed through the freezing wind as I plummeted into the abyss. The disciples watched in horror. Ji Chonghuai lunged forward, reaching out his hand. Come back. But I was gone. Everyone knew what lay at the bottom of that cliff. The jagged rocks and the freezing gales would tear a body to pieces before it even hit the ground. Ji Chonghuai stared into the void, his hand trembling. He didn't see a body. He only saw the mocking look in my eyes before I vanished. In that moment, something inside him shattered. 3 months later, a girl in a plain robe walked through the gates of Anding City. She blended into the crowd, looking like any other traveler. The first thing I did was head to a pharmacy to sell some spiritual herbs I'd gathered. I used the money to buy talisman supplies and kept the change for food. I sat down at a small noodle stall and ordered a bowl. As the steam hit my face, I finally felt like I was back in the world of the living. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months. I wasn't the same girl who had been dragged out of the sect hall. I was someone new, and I wasn't alone. I was the girl who had jumped from the mysterious ice cliff 3 months ago. Everyone thought I was dead. The cliff was known as a graveyard, but I knew a secret. There was a sliver of life at the bottom. I had escaped this way in my past life, and this time, I gambled everything on that memory. Before Ji Chonghuai forced me to the sect hall, I had already packed my belongings. I swiped every stalk of mystic spirit grass from the medicine garden and tucked them into my spatial bag. That leap wasn't suicide. It was a bet on survival. Luck was on my side. I lived. The brush with death triggered something inside me. As I plummeted, I felt the bottleneck of my foundation establishment stage shatter. I didn't just survive, I formed my golden core. But something was wrong. Instead of one core, 5 golden spheres spun inside me. I had regained my strength, yet I felt a strange confusion. Alongside those 5 cores, 5 tiny swirls of gaseous energy hovered in my dantian. It was as if I had regressed back to the chi refining stage while simultaneously holding the power of a golden core master. I tested it. The power was there, ready to be unleashed, but to any observer, I looked like a lowly beginner. If I condensed those 5 gas clouds into cores too, Would I have 10? The thought was unheard of. I shook my head. I couldn't dwell on it now. I finished my noodles, adjusted my bamboo hat, and left. Ending City was still under the Wushang sect's influence. I couldn't stay long. Shortly after I left, the manager of the pharmacy returned. He stared at the pile of mystic spirit grass I had sold to his clerk, his eyes wide with shock. Where did these come from? He demanded. A young Taoist brought them in. The clerk replied. She just left. The manager sprinted to the door, but the street was empty. I was already gone. He turned back, shouting at the clerk. Why didn't you stop her? Manager, they're just common herbs. The clerk stuttered, scratching his head. You always say we can handle those ourselves. Common. The manager's voice cracked. Have you ever seen herbs this fresh after being harvested? These are top tier. Only a heaven-grade spirit plant master could grow these. They're priceless. The clerk blinked. But that girl was only at the chi refining stage. The manager froze. A chi refining disciple? That was impossible. A heaven-grade master had to be at least at the nascent soul stage. I was already walking toward the mountains, putting distance between myself and the Wushang sect. I needed answers about my strange cultivation. I had lived in this body since I was 5, but I spent all those years confined to Qinyan Peak. I knew nothing of the outside world. However, in my previous life, I had wandered these lands for a century. I remembered the famous mountains and the legends. I traveled by foot and by flight, drawing stares from travelers. Is that a chi refining disciple flying? Someone whispered. You need to be at the foundation stage to use artifacts like that. How is she doing it? I ignored them and reached Jinshi town. I began asking around for a woman named Li Wanji. I asked at 7 or 8 houses, but no one knew her. I wasn't worried. I had patience. In my last life, I met Li Wanji 100 years from now, after she had founded the Baiji sect, the most mysterious intelligence network in the world. Back then, she told me she had spent a period of her life in misery right here in Jinshi town. Right now, she was likely still a nobody, hiding in the shadows. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I checked into an inn. My body still needed food, so I ordered a simple meal. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. It's dark. The ghost thing is coming back, someone yelled. Quick, lock the doors. The windows slammed shut. The streets went silent. I sat there with my chopsticks midair, the only person still trying to eat. The manager looked at me nervously. Go ahead and eat, Taoist. It won't bother us if we stay quiet. But then, a loud crunching sound echoed through the room. It made the skin on my neck crawl. The manager trembled. Maybe you should stop eating? It's not me, I said quietly. We all turned. In the corner sat a girl and a young man. The girl was hidden behind a massive stack of empty bowls, 2 or 3 rows of them. The man was covering his face with his hand, looking like he wanted to disappear. Senior sister, they're looking at us, the man whispered. The girl peeked out from behind her mountain of bowls and slurped a noodle loudly. She wasn't the source of the crunching. I looked down. Tied to the leg of their table was a small, struggling creature with a human face and a goat's body. A tautai, or rather, a young hybrid of one. One of the 4 great calamities. These things were bottomless pits that ate gold and jade. They were incredibly expensive to keep and violent if they weren't fed. These 2 looked barely 20, yet they had captured a calamity beast. I tried to recognize their robes, but I couldn't place them. As I watched them, they watched me. She eats so little, the girl, Bai Jian, whispered. I bet she can't fight. Look at the herbs in her sleeve. The man, Fong Hian, countered. The quality is insane. Is she a spirit plant master? Our eyes met for a second before we all looked away. The silence didn't last. A violent wind slammed into the inn, shattering the windows. Give me back my gold and jade, a voice roared. A man in white robes, Bai Ju, burst through the wreckage, charging toward the table. Fong Hian didn't even hesitate. He turned and bolted, leaving the girl to face the intruder alone. I stared, confused. The manager and the clerk were just as baffled. Fong Hian caught my look and shrugged. You don't get it. This is our sect tradition. The men hide, the women fight. The fight was over in seconds. Bai Jian threw a single punch that sent the intruder flying back out the window. The man in white stood outside, stomping his feet and cursing. You people from the Tiani sect. I didn't even provoke you. Why did you steal my treasure? Tiani sect? I froze. They were once one of the top 3 sects, famous for only accepting geniuses. But over the decades, their ranking had plummeted until they vanished from the records entirely. In my previous life, I never heard a word about them. I thought they had gone extinct. Outside, the man's insults were getting nastier. Bai Jian wiped her mouth and stood up. Fang Hian's eyes went wide. Senior sister, no? We can't afford to pay for. Too late. Bai Jian smashed the table with her palm and lunged through the window, a gale of violent energy trailing in her wake. The force of Bai Jian's lunge was terrifying. The entire inn shook as if an earthquake had struck, and a second later, the entire row of doors and windows collapsed into splinters. The young man in white, who had been shouting just a moment ago, stood amidst the ruins with a look of pure, hollow shock. 7. As Fang Hian uttered the final number, Bai Jian's footsteps finally ground to a halt. She turned her head, looking back at the half-demolished building she had just created. Her mouth hung open for a second, then she winced. I watched, stunned, as the 3 of them suddenly snapped into a perfect 90-degree bow. They were apologizing to the manager and me in unison. The young man in white was being held down by Bai Jian's heavy hand, struggling to get up. You guys smashed the inn, he yelled, his voice muffled by the dirt. What does this have to do with me? Why do I have to apologize? Bai Jian didn't argue. She just slapped him once, hard. I watched the man get driven straight into the ground like a nail, his body disappearing into a fresh pit in the floorboards. He didn't move for a long time. The manager was shaking so hard, he looked like he was about to collapse. Don't be scared, Fang Hian said, trying to sound soothing. My second senior sister doesn't hit people. Really? I looked over. Bai Jian was currently squatting next to the man in white, actively digging him out of the hole, just so she could probably hit him again. The manager didn't wait for another word. He dropped to his knees, hands raised in the air. Great immortals, please spare us, he wailed. We're just a small business. Tell us what you want, and we'll give it to you. Fang Hian sighed, looking at the wreckage. He wasn't a bandit, just a clumsy cultivator. He reached into his robes to pay for the damage, but after a frantic search, he only managed to produce 2 measly spirit stones. He looked at Bai Jian, his face turning a deep shade of red. Senior sister, do you have any more? Bai Jian dragged the man in white out of the pit by his collar. No, but he does. Without a hint of hesitation, she reached into the man's robes and fished out a heavy silk bag. That's my money, the man screamed. It's mine now, Bai Jian replied flatly. I stood there, my eyes locked on the man in white. I had been staring for a long time, trying to place the face. He looked so familiar, like a ghost from a dream I couldn't quite remember. Finally, I spoke a name I wasn't even sure was right. Li Wanji? All 3 of them froze and turned to look at me. The silence was heavy. It turned out they all knew each other, but even with the stolen bag of stones, it wasn't enough to cover the manager's losses. Li Wanji was throwing a tantrum, refusing to give up another cent, and Fang Hian was hovering on the edge of another fight. I walked over to the shattered window frames and sighed. It doesn't have to be this complicated. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out a blank piece of yellow paper. With a quick, practiced motion, I used my finger dipped in cinnabar to trace a complex array. It was a repair talisman. As I slapped the paper onto the frame, a soft golden light erupted. An invisible force swept through the room, lifting the splinters and broken glass. Like a movie playing in reverse, the windows and doors snapped back into their hinges. The manager and the Tiani sect disciples stood there with their mouths hanging open. Even Bai Jian's eyes were sparkling with wonder. So cool, she breathed. The words had barely left her mouth when 2 of the windows fell forward and slammed onto the street with a loud crash. I stared at the fallen wood, lost in thought. The quality of the paper was just too poor to hold the spiritual energy. It's enough, Fang Hian shouted, clearly relieved. He and Li Wanji scrambled to fix the last few windows by hand, hammering away late into the night. Bai Jian wanted to help, but Fang Hian practically blocked her path with his body. He knew her strength. If she tried to help, she'd probably bring the whole street down. Instead, she stood by the door, holding her small gluttonous beast, watching the work. I stood beside her. Bai Jian was tall and lean, with the kind of wiry muscle that spoke of raw, natural power. She was half a head taller than me, and as she looked down, her eyes softened with a strange sense of pity. She reached into her robes and pulled out a plain, white steamed bun. I hid this before we started eating, she whispered, holding it out to me. It's clean. I looked at her hand, then at the bun. She had noticed that I hadn't touched a single bite of my meal before the chaos started. I took it, the warmth of the bread seeping into my palm. Thank you. She grinned at me, a bright, honest smile. But as I looked into her eyes, my mind suddenly fractured. A flood of information that shouldn't have been there surged into my brain. Bai Jian, the 101st generation disciple of the Tianyi sect, born with divine strength and a heavenly earth spirit root, betrayed by the person she loved. Her spirit root and her heart were ripped out of her chest while she was still alive. The vision flashed before my eyes, a cold, bloody image of Bai Jian's corpse, her eyes wide and glassy, staring at a sky she would never see again. I turned pale, my grip loosening. The bun started to slip from my fingers, but Bai Jian caught it before it hit the ground. She pressed it back into my hand, her skin warm against mine. The contrast between her living warmth and the gruesome image in my head made me shiver. You look sick, she said, her voice full of genuine concern. She pointed a finger at Li Wanji. Did she bully you? I'll beat her up for you. Li Wanji jumped nearly 3 feet in the air. I didn't do anything. I don't even know her. Fang Hian shook his head, looking disappointed. Look at her. She's about to cry. You must have done something. Did she travel all this way just to find you because you're innocent? Li Wanji looked like she wanted to scream. I just refused to join your sect. You don't have to ruin my reputation like this. She turned to me, frantic. Hey, little girl, tell them. We've never met, right? The most I've done is steal a few things from the Tianyi sect. I never touched your stuff. I wiped my eyes and realized I was actually crying. The weight of the future I had seen was crushing. The wind, it just got in my eyes. I lied. Li Wanji looked like she was about to drop to her knees in thanks. We didn't stay much longer. By the time the windows were patched, the 4 of us left the town under the cover of night. Li Wanji tried to keep her distance from me, but Fang Hian kept shoving her toward me, convinced there was some secret history between us. You remember me from a past life, I said softly, my voice steady now. Li Wanji scoffed, though she looked nervous. How could you remember a past life? That's impossible. I looked her straight in the eye. I remember everything you did after you turned 3. You told me everything yourself. You told me that if I ever got into trouble, I could find you. You said you would protect me. Li Wanji blinked, her mouth hanging open. She scratched her head, looking utterly baffled. That honestly sounds like the kind of boast I'd make, but I really don't remember saying it. Fang Hian looked at Bai Jian. Senior sister, what do we do? The sect leader told us to bring Li Wanji back. Should we bring her too? Bai Jian didn't even hesitate. She looked at me, then at the dark horizon. Take them both. The Tianyi sect was located far to the north, a massive distance from the Wushang sect. We traveled for 3 days and 3 nights, soaring over the Qinling Mountains. Bai Jian carried us all, her spiritual energy seemingly bottomless. When we finally crossed into Tianyi territory, the tension in their shoulders finally vanished. They were home. We stopped in the forest to rest for the night, and Fang Hian, ever the prepared junior, pulled out a stack of 100 pancakes to feed the group. Bai Jian finished her bowl in less than an hour. By the time the first light of dawn hit the sky, she was already leading the 3 of us across the mountain barriers of the Tianyi sect. We flew straight toward the main gate. A massive range of mountains unfolded before my eyes. It was spectacular. Unlike the delicate, elegant peaks of the Wushang sect, these mountains were raw and powerful. Since it was winter, the peaks were capped with thick white snow. There wasn't a hint of green in sight, just shades of gray and white, but it didn't make them look any less majestic or dangerous. Before we even reached the main peak, a roar echoed through the air. Who stole my herbs again? Who was it? Fang Hian turned pale and looked like he wanted to vanish. Oh no, he whispered. I was in such a rush to leave that I dug up some herbs from Marshal Uncle Sun Yin's field to pay for travel expenses. I forgot to tell him. Bai Jian glanced at him, her face expressionless. You're dead. Fang Hian didn't wait and steered his sword toward the shouting. Marshal Uncle. It was me. The sound of chaos and chasing drifted through the wind from the high peaks. I looked down from the sword, and could see spiritual energy flowing through the valleys like a river, but the wind felt strange. It carried a tint of red, but it wasn't the fiery red of burning flames. It was the red of barren earth. It felt poor, and Li Wanji looked devastated. She leaned toward me, looking like her world had ended. Bringing me here, my life is over. We're both finished. I looked at her, my expression blank. She realized I had no idea what she was talking about. Don't you know anything about the Tiani sect? She hissed. I know the name, I replied. Do you know what they're famous for? Genius cultivators? I guessed. No, she groaned, clutching her heart. They're famous for being poor. I've never seen a sect this broke in my entire life. They can barely afford to eat. How are we supposed to stay here? She leaned closer, whispering urgently. Listen, when you get the chance, run. Don't look back. I didn't say anything. I wasn't planning on staying anyway. But looking at her, I started to doubt myself. Did this girl really know how to cultivate the martial root? Maybe I had come here too early. Bai Jian flew ahead like a streak of light, bringing us down onto the main peak. The landing was fast. Li Wanji stumbled off the sword, spun in circles, and spent the next 15 minutes vomiting. I stood there, perfectly fine. Bai Jian looked at Li Wanji with a flat gaze. You're both at the qi refining stage. Your rank is actually higher than hers. Why are you so weak? The comment stung Li Wanji visibly. She grit her teeth and turned to me. What level are you? Level 1, I said. Li Wanji stared at me. Level 1? How can a level 1 use restoration talismans? I didn't blink. I ignored her suspicion. What's wrong with level 1? You can still use talismans at level 1. Bai Jian suddenly tilted her head, as if listening to a secret transmission. After a moment, she turned to us. Follow me. The sect leader wants to see you. I hesitated. Can I skip it? No, Bai Jian said. She dragged Li Wanji along while I followed behind. I expected to be led to a grand hall, but Bai Jian took a turn toward a cluster of humble shacks on a side peak. Soon, the scent of cooking food wafted through the air. Is this the kitchen? I asked. Yes, Bai Jian said openly. Disciples below the golden core stage still need to eat. Tiani sect has a cafeteria. I understood that, but meeting the sect leader in a kitchen felt wrong. It was breakfast time. Usually, senior brothers or masters did the cooking. I certainly didn't. We walked inside. A man with a cold, stern face emerged from the back, carrying a massive pot of plain white rice. There were no side dishes. No meat. Just rice. Li Yin is out, the man said. I'm cooking today. Bai Jian bowed respectfully. Martial Uncle Yanju. Even the arrogant Li Wanji stiffened up. She bowed low, looking terrified. Martial Uncle. I wasn't a member of the sect, but I followed Bai Jian's lead and gave a polite junior's greeting. Junior Yi Wanwan greets the senior. Yanju's eyes locked onto me. His gaze flickered. The little girl. Is she a new recruit? Yes, Bai Jian said. Has she been officially registered? Not yet. I just brought her back. Oh. Yanju set the rice down and began staring at me with an intensity that felt like it could pierce through my skin. I frowned and stared right back at him. Bai Jian stepped in front of me, blocking his view. Martial Uncle, you're scaring her. Yanju grunted and pulled his gaze back. Sit. The three of us sat down. Li Wanji looked resigned to her fate. She grabbed a bowl and started shoveling rice into her mouth. She handed one to me. Eat. If you don't eat now, there won't be anything left. I looked at the plain rice. I had no appetite. Bai Jian scooped a bowl for Fong Hian and set it aside. Then, with a loud thud, she pulled the entire remaining pot of rice toward herself. She saw me watching. Want more? Before I could answer, she scooped a massive mountain of rice into my bowl, pressing it down hard until the bowl was overflowing. Then she hugged her giant pot like it was her most prized possession. Yanju and Li Wanji didn't even look surprised. They just waited. The bowl Bai Jian set aside was for Fong Hian, but I wasn't sure who Yanju was waiting for. Then, a cheerful voice echoed from the back. Little Bai, you're back. Master, Bai Jian acknowledged. Li Mingda, the sect leader of Tiani, walked in carrying 2 large plates of meat. He set them down in front of us. When he saw Li Wanji, he chuckled. Mission accomplished, I see. Li Wanji slumped her shoulders. Don't look so miserable, little one, the sect leader laughed. Stay at Tiani. You won't regret it. Li Wanji grumbled under her breath. She had been here a month and had regretted every second of it. The sect leader's gaze shifted to me. Surprise flashed in his eyes. And this is Junior Sister, Bai Jian said. The table went dead silent. Only Yenju kept staring at me, deep in thought. He didn't deny it. The junior sister I brought back, Bai Jian repeated. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Senior sister Bai, I only came here to figure out what that vision meant. I never agreed to join. Bai Jian tilted her head. Do you dislike me? No, I said. Do you dislike the Tianyi sect? Not really. Good. Bai Jian turned to her master. Master, she agreed to stay. The exchange was so blunt and simple that Li Mingda burst out laughing. Good. Then stay, she shall. I blinked. Wait, did anyone actually ask me? Before I could protest, the master and disciple had already settled it. Fang Hian came rushing in just then, breathless. Did I miss breakfast? Martial Uncle Sun Een is making me replant everything tomorrow. I'm going to be busy. He stopped when he saw the sect leader and Yenju. His tone turned formal instantly. Sect leader. Martial Uncle Yenju. Littlein, come meet your new junior sister, Li Mingda said, beaming. Fang Hian looked at Li Wanji, then at me. Junior sister? Since when? Now, Yenju said. Fang Hian looked lost. He had no idea what had happened while he was being chased. I looked around the table. It felt like the matter was already set in stone. Every time I tried to speak, someone just pushed more food into my bowl. Eat, they said. It felt familiar. It had been so long since anyone had shown me this kind of simple care. I looked at the sect leader. He was watching everyone eat with a look of pure pride. It was the look of an elder watching over his children. It was a look I had never seen on Yinding's face. I couldn't bring myself to say the words to leave. I lowered my head and started eating the rice. I'll stay for a little while, I told myself. I can always leave later. Bai Jian, meanwhile, had already finished her entire pot of rice. Bai Jian didn't waste a single drop. She used her rice to soak up every bit of leftover sauce from the plates until they were spotless. Despite how much she ate, her stomach didn't even bulge. I wondered where all that food actually went. She stood up and patted my shoulder. Follow me. I glanced at Li Mingda and the others. The old man just smiled warmly at me. Go on, child. Let her show you around. I offered a respectful bow and followed Bai Jian. She led me away quickly, almost as if she were afraid I might try to make a run for it. We left the dining hall, and she began the grand tour. She showed me the lecture halls, the training grounds, and the library pavilion. We walked past the alchemy rooms and the ritual chambers. She even pointed out the distant peaks where the other elders lived, insisting I learn the layout of the entire mountain range. Why? I finally asked. Bai Jian stopped and turned around. The confusion on my face must have been obvious. I never said I was staying, I reminded her. She looked me straight in the eyes. You have nowhere else to go. I started to argue, but she pointed a finger directly at my chest, right over my heart. Listen to what's in here. You have nowhere else to go. My chest tightened. She was right. Bai Jian smiled then, a look that was surprisingly gentle and comforting. It's good here. Just stay. I looked at her. She seemed to be a few years older than me, maybe 20, but she lacked the cynical edge of someone who had seen the world. She didn't feel like a 20-year-old woman. She felt like a girl of 12. She had been protected. She was kind. I ended up settling into the disciple quarters. Since I hadn't officially joined a specific master yet, I stayed on the main peak. Once the formal ceremony happened, I would choose a peak master to follow. As we talked, I realized something shocking. The entire Tianyi sect had fewer than 20 people in it. Bai Jian told me she had an entire mountain peak all to herself just for practicing. I don't usually like going to my own peak, though, she admitted. I prefer staying here. I went quiet, thinking. This sect didn't seem poor. Even back at the underpopulated Qingyun peak of my old life, they never had enough space for one disciple per mountain. We don't have much else, Bai Jian said, but we have plenty of land. If you want to plant something, just pick a spot. I nodded. I have to report to Master now, she said. You rest. I'll come get you this afternoon to take you somewhere. Once she left, I sat alone in my room. I looked out the open window at a winter plum tree. The sunlight hit the white blossoms, making them glow like gold against the dark branches. It was beautiful. I wondered if I really could stay here. Bai Jian was right. I was homeless. I had no home in my past life, and I had none in this one. I let out a self-deprecating laugh and sat down on the bed, crossing my legs. I began my daily meditation. I felt the energy circulate through my meridians. After 2 full cycles, my cultivation stabilized at the first level of chi refining. I was only 1 step away from the second. I didn't stop. I pushed the energy harder, focusing on the breakthrough. 2 hours passed. Finally, a small ripple of energy expanded outward from my core. I had reached the second level. It was done. I looked inward at my spiritual sea. My 5 golden cores were still there, rotating in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Beside them were 5 clusters of mist representing my elements. The red fire mist and blue water mist were the largest. My fire root was at the peak of the second level. Water was in the middle. The others, metal, wood, and earth, were just at the beginning. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. It was a start. By the time I finished, it was late afternoon. I realized I had missed my appointment with Bai Jian. I hurried out of my room and pushed open the courtyard gate, only to find Li Wanji and Fong Hian squatting outside. "I've been at this sect for years," Fong Hian said, looking impressed. "Aside from the eldest senior brother, you're the most hardworking person I've ever seen." Li Wanji looked horrified. "You were practicing? Just like that? Brother, is your life really that boring?" I stretched my wrists. I had nothing else to do. "You could have slept," they both shouted at the same time. Fong Hian shook his head. "If I knew you were that bored, I would have dragged you to help Marshal Uncle Sunin plant herbs." Li Wanji hopped over the railing into the courtyard. "Are you really staying here?" Fong Hian gave her a look. "You're thinking of running again?" Master said it himself. "You're a person of Tianyi sect in life, and a ghost of Tianyi sect in death. There's no escape." Li Wanji jumped up, screaming at the top of her lungs. "I already told you. You don't have to refund my tuition. Why are you still holding me here? My dad paid the fee. Go find him." Fong Hian looked dead serious. "We took the money, so we have to provide the service. That's our principle. You're staying, junior brother." Li Wanji opened her mouth to launch into another tirade, but Fong Hian didn't give her the chance. He flicked his finger, tossing a pill straight into her open mouth. Instantly, the world went quiet. Li Wanji's throat moved. Her face turned red, but no sound came out. She started waving her arms wildly at him. "It's just a failed batch of pills," Fong Hian explained to me with a smile. "Great for making people shut up. Anyway, our second senior sister is busy, so she asked me to take you to the bone cleansing pool." I froze. The bone cleansing pool? I can go there. That was a restricted area in most sects. Back at the Wushang sect, only the top 3 disciples in the annual competition were allowed inside. I had won that right almost every year, but I always gave my spot away to my senior brothers. I figured I'd have plenty of chances later. Then Yi Qian arrived, and I never got the chance again. Of course, Fong Hian laughed. "Every new disciple goes. Even our little junior brother here." Li Wanji actually started trembling. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead. She looked terrified. The pool was on the main peak, so we didn't need to fly. Fong Hian led us through a purple bamboo forest and up a long flight of stone steps. We stopped at the 377th step and turned onto a side path. 100 paces later, we reached a frigid, steaming pond. "We're here," Fong Hian said. Before Li Wanji could react, he stepped behind her and kicked her straight into the water. Then, he tucked his hands into his sleeves and turned to me with a gentle smile. "Don't worry, junior sister. Girls get special treatment." I watched as Li Wanji sank. Her mouth was wide open in what looked like a scream of pure agony, but she was still silenced. Frosty mist began to rise from her body as the water worked on her. She was literally smoking. The mist grew thicker, completely swallowing her. She blew a few bubbles and sank to the bottom. Fong Hian counted the seconds under his breath before fishing her out. 60 breaths longer than last time, he noted. Li Wanji lay on the ground, her eyes rolled back in her head, unable to speak. Looking at her, I abandoned any hope of asking her for cultivation advice. This Li Wanji was nothing like the legendary figure she would become in the future. The gap was almost depressing. I wondered what could possibly happen to turn this greedy, loudmouth girl into the cold, silent information king of the future. "Junior sister, come here," Fong Hian said. His smile was kind, but after seeing that kick, I didn't trust it for a second. His leg strength was terrifyingly precise. The bone-cleansing pool purifies your foundation, he said softly. Everyone reacts differently, depending on their constitution. Since it's your first time, you don't need to stay in for too long, Fong Hian said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Just go in and feel it. If it gets to be too much, tell me. I'll come help you. He handed me a set of clean clothes and a purple hair ribbon, the signature color of the Tiani sect. Since I was a girl, he told me he'd wait at the bottom of the stone steps to give me privacy. He promised he'd be close enough to hear if I called out. Then, without another word, he grabbed Li Wanji by the collar and started dragging her away. She hadn't even changed her wet clothes yet. You're at the 5th level of chi refining. I heard him scold her as they walked away. You should have learned how to use magic to steam your clothes dry by now. Li Wanji just whimpered. What's wrong? Can't speak? Did the pool turn your brain to mush? I watched them go, wondering if I should remind Fong Hian that he'd just fed her a silencing pill. He seemed to have completely forgotten. Their figures eventually disappeared down the long stone staircase, leaving me alone in the freezing mist. I set my clean clothes on the ground. To my surprise, a stone platform rose up from the floor to keep them dry, and green silk curtains unfurled around the pool, shielding me from the wind and any prying eyes. Even the biting chill of the bone-cleansing pool seemed to soften. I felt a flicker of realization. This was an array, a protective formation. My treatment was worlds apart from the tough love Li Wanji had received. I stripped down to my inner robe and stepped into the water barefoot. I expected a bone-shattering chill, but it never came. Instead, a wave of warmth wrapped around my ankles and climbed up my legs. It wasn't painful at all. It felt welcoming. I took a breath and submerged myself. The warmth was absolute. It chased away the early winter cold and the lingering ache of being hunted and discarded by my former sect. For a second, I wondered if Fong Hian was playing a prank on me. This didn't feel like a bone-cleansing pool. It felt like a hot spring. But then, I felt it. Strands of power began snaking into my meridians. They moved like tiny threads of light, stitching together the cracks I had caused when I crippled my own cultivation. My meridians began to widen like riverbeds during a flood. My spiritual energy started to race, eventually roaring into my dantian and swelling the 5 clouds of mist gathering there. While I was soaking, elsewhere in the sect, Yanju and Li Mingda were locked in a heated debate. Give the kid to me, Yanju said. Li Mingda, usually a jovial man, looked uncharacteristically troubled. Junior brother, it's not that I don't want to. This is the first time you've ever asked me for a disciple. But you can't teach this child. Yanju's eyebrows shot up. Can't teach her? Not won't, but can't. That sounds like a challenge. It's the truth, Li Mingda sighed. Did you not notice her spirit root? It's special. It's a heaven-grade root, Yanju snapped. I saw it. That's why I want her. Talent like that is rare, and her willpower is even rarer. I'm shocked no other sect found her first. Now that she's at Tiani, we can't let her talent go to waste. It is a heaven-grade root, Li Mingda said slowly. But it's a martial spirit root. Yanju froze. Having one heaven-grade root was a miracle. But this girl didn't have one. She had 5. Yanju stared at his brother in silence for a long time. He knew Li Mingda wasn't mistaken. A heaven-grade martial spirit root was a tragedy. In the cultivation world, it had another name, the trash root. No matter how hard you practiced, you could never break through the nascent soul stage. You'd be stuck at the golden core stage forever. The only way to fix it was to destroy 4 of the roots to let one thrive, but that was forbidden. No one knew if the remaining root would even stay heaven-grade, or if the person would survive the process. It was a gamble the Tiani sect would never take. It went against the natural order. We can't teach her, Li Mingda said with a small smile. But I know someone who can. Yanju immediately knew who he meant. Forget it. He said he'd never take another disciple as long as he lived. Maybe there's an exception, Li Mingda laughed. Want to bet? Fine, Yanju said, crossing his arms. What's the wager? If you lose, you have to take Li Wanji as your disciple. Yanju winced. That was a cruel bet. I'll take it, because there's no way he'll agree. Yanju stood up to leave, but stopped after a few paces. I'm heading down the mountain for a few days. Take care of things while I'm gone. Why are you leaving? The kitchen only has 3 days of grain left, Yanju said coldly. I'm going to find a way to make some money. Tell Sun In to hurry up and grow some crops. If he doesn't, we won't be able to afford to eat. Li Mingde looked embarrassed. They had all spent so many years in secluded meditation that they had forgotten how to farm. Raising a new generation of disciples was proving to be much harder than they expected. If they didn't start recruiting and training soon, the Tianyi sect would literally die out. They were down to their last options. Back at the pool, Fang Hian was pacing the stone steps, looking terrified. How long has she been in there? He whispered. 15 minutes, Li Wanji replied, looking equally worried. Fang Hian bolted upright. 15 minutes? That's too long. Li Wanji nodded. When she had gone in, she wanted to scream and jump out instantly. How was a little girl lasting this long? The record for our generation was only 7 minutes. Fang Hian muttered, rushing back toward the pool. Something's wrong. She might have fainted. I have to check. He charged up the steps, ready to shout my name, but he stopped dead when he heard the rustle of fabric. I was already dressing. He quickly turned his back. Li Wanji caught up, panting. Is she okay? Did she pass out? Fang Hian pushed her head away so she couldn't look. She's fine. She's coming out. I stepped out from behind the curtains, wearing my new Tianyi sect robes. Fang Hian and Li Wanji both stared, nodding in approval. Before, I looked like a stray cat. Unique, maybe, but homeless. But in these robes, everything changed. I finally looked like I belonged somewhere. It felt like the clothes were made for me. Li Wanji circled around me, her eyes gleaming. She looked like she had just discovered a hidden treasure. She remarked that I made a cheap set of robes look like they cost a fortune. Before I could respond, she reached out to fiddle with the fabric, joking that if I helped her sell clothes, we'd make a killing. Fang Hian stepped in and pushed her head away. He told her to shut up and called her a money grubber, reminding her that sect robes weren't for sale. I ignored their bickering and bowed to them both. I thanked Fang Hian and explained that I was fine. I had just stayed in the marrow cleansing pool a little longer because I was curious. Fang Hian seemed to buy it. He probably thought I was just hesitating at the edge, afraid to get in. He mentioned that Li Wanji had once spent an hour stalling before he finally lost his patience and kicked her into the water. He looked at me with growing fondness and told me he was the third-ranked disciple. He said I could call him third senior brother. Bai Jian was second, and they had a first senior brother who was currently away. Li Wanji was fourth, which made me the sixth disciple. I couldn't help but notice the gap. I asked what happened to the fifth. Fang Hian explained that the sect uncle had already reserved a fifth disciple, but they hadn't been brought back yet. It might be a while before we met him. As he led us down the mountain, those words, reserved and brought back, sounded ominous. Li Wanji shivered, asking if the fifth disciple was being kidnapped too. Fang Hian gave him a look. He said it was different. Apparently, the fifth disciple had a stubborn personality, and the sect uncle said it would take at least 3 visits and a lot of persuasion to trick him into joining. But as for me, Fang Hian grinned and reminded Li Wanji that he was a gift from his own father. Li Wanji looked like he had just realized he'd walked straight into a tiger's den. We left the pool and entered another building. From the outside, it looked like a modest 2-story structure. Inside, it was a single, massive hall. The ceiling soared 80 feet high, making me feel incredibly small. Fang Hian stopped at the entrance and told us to feel the energy. Li Wanji didn't hesitate. He found a spot on the wide platform and flopped down, telling me this place was much more fun than the pool. As I stepped onto the platform, light began to pour from the dome above. Spiritual energy surged through the air, channeled by an ancient array, and flooded into our bodies. It was a spirit infusion. My heart raced. After marrow cleansing, a cultivator's meridians expand. If you use a powerful infusion array at that exact moment to gather heaven and earth energy, you can solidify your foundation instantly. Some even break through to the chi refining stage right then and there. Even though Li Wanji and I weren't total beginners, this was incredibly valuable. The combined effect of the pool and the infusion was massive. A spirit infusion array like this was exorbitantly expensive. Even the wealthy Wushang sect only had a tiny gathering array near their pool. But the Tianyi sect was different. They had converted an entire ancient building into a massive infusion array that absorbed the essence of the sun, moon, and mountains year-round. I realized then that the Tiani sect's foundation was deep, far deeper than their ragged exterior suggested. Li Wanji just grumbled that they were living off their ancestors' glory and warned me I'd see how poor they really were soon enough. I didn't care. Most disciples at other sects wouldn't get an opportunity like this in 10 years. I had been at Wushang sect for ages and had never even seen their pool. I sat down and began to breathe, absorbing the energy. The 5 spheres of gas in my body spun rapidly. My fire's spiritual root, which had already reached the 3rd level in the pool, was now pushing toward the 4th. Beside me, Li Wanji's aura was becoming more refined, hovering on the edge of a breakthrough to the 6th level of chi refining. But he didn't seem to notice. He was fast asleep, snoring in the warmth of the spiritual energy. I looked at him, annoyed. He had no idea how lucky he was. An hour later, Fong Hian came to collect us. He was covered in grass stains and ink, clearly having been busy while we trained. The sun was setting as he took us to the dining hall and then back to the disciple quarters. He told me to rest well after my long journey and officially welcomed me to the sect. He promised I'd love what was coming tomorrow. Li Wanji's eye started twitching. A bad omen, he muttered. Fong Hian just dragged him away to his room next door, promising to help him catch up on his missed lessons. Finally alone, I went into my room. Something moved in my storage bag. I realized I'd almost forgotten the black tortoise. I let it out and found a basket for it, promising a better home tomorrow. I even gave it some spirit grass. It didn't complain and settled in immediately. I sat cross-legged and meditated, finishing my first peaceful day at the Tiani sect. The next morning, Bai Jian knocked on my door. I opened it immediately, already dressed in my robes and full of energy. She looked me over, gave a satisfied nod, and told me it was time for morning lessons. I expected a lecture or meditation, but the Tiani sect did things differently. Their morning lesson wasn't about scriptures. It was about beating each other up. Fong Hian called it sparring, but as I watched Li Wanji being dragged into the martial arena for his 2nd round of torture, it looked like a beatdown. Li Wanji reached out a hand toward me, his eyes pleading for help. Fong Hian just shoved his hand back down, the sound of Li Wanji's cracking joints echoing his fading hope. Fong Hian just laughed, telling him that if he couldn't even take a punch, he'd never survive as a cultivator, even if he was just a pharmacist. You need the practice, junior sister Li, Fong Hian said, his voice echoing through the training grounds. Li Wanji started wailing, but no one came to her rescue. I watched as Fong Hian led her through a series of moves. It was painful to see. She was clumsy, barely managing to dodge the first few strikes. By the 2nd move, a fist caught her right in the cheek. By the 4th, she was flat on her back, completely defeated. She had absolutely no foundation to speak of. She won't die. Bai Jian's voice drifted from beside me. I snapped out of my thoughts. Bai Jian had changed into her training robes. She looked sharp, focused, and intimidating. I want to test your skills first, she said. I nodded, my heart picking up speed. All right, please go easy on me, senior sister. We stood opposite each other, the morning chill biting at my skin. But as our eyes met, the air seemed to crackle with heat. It wasn't hostility. It was pure battle intent. We moved at the same time. Our fists collided with a heavy thud. The force traveled from my knuckles, through my wrist, and surged up my arm. I felt the sheer, raw power Bai Jian possessed. For a second, my feet skidded back. I almost couldn't take the impact. I forced myself to stop after half a step. My eyes lit up. I felt a rush of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. Bai Jian looked just as eager. We didn't waste words. We clashed again. Fists whistled through the air. I dodged, countered, and blocked, barely staying ahead of her unpredictable strikes. Her style was simple but devastatingly effective. 3 moves, 4, 5. Our shadows blurred as we picked up speed. The sound of our hits, the meat-on-meat slap of real combat, was so loud that Fong Hian and Li Wanji stopped their own session to watch. This is the first time I've seen someone last 10 moves against the great demon without being sent flying, Li Wanji muttered. She was sitting on the ground, dazed, her eyes following our afterimages. Fong Hian looked just as shocked. He knew Bai Jian's strength was legendary among our peers. Only our eldest senior brother could really challenge her, and even he had admitted that in terms of raw physical power, he couldn't match her. Now, A new junior sister had appeared out of nowhere and was holding her own. A genius, Fong Hian whispered. She's a natural for the Tianyi sect. We reached 18 moves. Suddenly, I pulled back. Stop, I called out. Bai Jian's fist froze exactly 1 inch from my face. Her eyes were still bright with the thrill of the fight, but she looked confused. Why stop? She asked. I let out a breath and forced a smile. I surrender, senior sister. She tilted her head. Why? I held up my hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. My hands hurt too much. Fong Hian walked over, wincing in sympathy. Li Wanji, however, was staring at me like I was a mastermind. You're a genius, Li Wanji whispered to herself. She thought I was faking the severity of the pain so I could skip morning lessons for the next 2 weeks. She looked regretful, wishing she had thought of injuring herself first. Fong Hian saw right through her. Don't even dream about it, junior sister Li. Your constitution is different. You're the type who could stay alive even if you were killed. I blinked. Dead but alive? Was she immortal or just incredibly sturdy? Bai Jian took me to get some medicine, looking genuinely guilty about her strength. I didn't control my power well, she apologized. It's fine, senior sister, I said, trying to reassure her. I'll be okay after a short rest. She looked at me tentatively. When you're better, will you still fight me? I realized then why she was so worried. With Li Yin away, she had no one to spar with. She was lonely. I'll fight, I promised. She looked relieved. While I rested, I watched her and Fong Hian go back to training Li Wanji. I realized then that Li Wanji really was special. No matter how many times she was knocked down, she healed at an impossible rate. Her progress was slow, maybe 1 or 2 moves a session, but her stamina was bottomless. I realized I hadn't known her at all in my past life. After an hour of one-sided beating, we headed to the cafeteria. It was cold and empty. Looks like Uncle went down the mountain to find work again, Fong Hian said. There are some old steamed buns left. I'll heat them up. Bai Jian went to help him. I tried to join in, but they both pushed me away, insisting I rest my hands. Li Wanji just collapsed onto the table, moaning for food like a dying woman. Fong Hian stacked 5 tiers of buns on the stove. The bottom 4 are for you, senior sister, he told Bai Jian. The top 1 is for the rest of us. Bai Jian nodded and started the fire. I watched her, thinking about the flash of memory I'd had before. How could someone as strong as her die so horribly? She was years older than me, but she had the innocent mind of a child. Who would want to hurt her? Junior sister, you must be hungry. Have a piece of flatbread first. Fong Hian handed me a piece of bread. The moment my skin touched the food he held, my vision blurred. Suddenly, I wasn't in the kitchen. It was night. A torrential downpour was screaming around me. I saw Fong Hian standing in the rain, her body riddled with deep, jagged sword wounds. Blood mixed with the rain, staining the ground beneath her feet. She was dying. Her eyes were fixed on a point near me, and as her breath failed, a look of profound relief crossed her face. You're okay, she whispered. That's good. My heart squeezed with a pain so sharp I couldn't breathe. The grief and despair were so real, so overwhelming, that I felt like I was the one dying. Junior sister, what's wrong? I snapped back. My face was deathly pale, and I was gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. Did I poison it? Fong Hian stammered, looking terrified. Fong Hian, did you put your weird drugs in the food again? Li Wanji shouted. I didn't. My medicine bags are banned from the kitchen, Fong Hian protested. Besides, she hasn't even taken a bite yet. I couldn't speak. I looked at the bread in my hand. Twice now. Every time they gave me something, I saw their deaths. Was I seeing the future? Fong Hian snatched the bread back and threw it in the trash. Don't eat it. You're scaring me. Just wait, I'll cook some fresh porridge. Bai Jian led me outside to sit and drink some hot tea. I sat there in the cold morning air, my hands still trembling, wondering why the universe was showing me how everyone I cared about was going to die. Fong Hian hauled up 5 massive buckets of steamed buns all by himself. It was a staggering amount of food, but Li Wanji didn't even blink. She was used to the sight. We ate in a heavy, focused silence. Bai Jian finished his portion with mechanical speed, barely tasting a thing. Once the meal ended, it was time for our daily tasks. Fong Hian started handing out chores to everyone. He and Li Wanji were heading to Senior Uncle Sun Yin's place to tend to the spirit Lingji mushrooms. Bai Jian's task was his usual routine. He headed toward the Great Mountain Array. He used the formation's intense pressure to forge his own strength, while simultaneously feeding his energy back into the array to help it evolve. Then Fang Hian turned to me. He told me I was in charge of organizing the ancient books. He paused, squinting at my face with genuine concern. He asked if I was feeling better. He told me that if I wasn't up for it, I should just go back to my room and rest. I had already forced my expression back to normal. The horrific visions of their deaths were locked away in the back of my mind for now. I told him I was fine, but I couldn't help but feel hesitant. I looked him in the eye and asked if he was sure about giving me such an important job. Ancient books were the lifeblood of any sect. I was a complete stranger here. I hadn't formally joined the sect, and I hadn't even performed the disciples' bow to a master. Giving an outsider access to their archives didn't make sense. Was the Tianyi sect really this reckless with their secrets? Fang Hian didn't even hesitate. He told me it was perfectly fine. Of course it was. He acted like it was the most natural thing in the world.